So I'm very happy to introduce JJ, who is, you know what? I'll let JJ introduce himself a little bit and talk about who he is, what he has to do with sumo, and after that, maybe we'll get into your background a little bit, JJ. Go ahead, tell us who you are, JJ.
All right, I'm JJ Jones. I am the co-founder of Honu Sumo, located in San Diego and Orange County. We're a little bit all over the place in the SoCal. Also, I am the third year in a row national, I guess, head coach, IFS coach. The title changes a little every year, but we're going for the third time this year, and we're going to Thailand. So excited about that.
Yeah, yeah, exciting, very exciting. And this your third year in a row? Is that what you said?
Third year in a row. First year was Japan. Second year was Poland, and then now we're going all the way to Thailand, Bangkok.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, quite the trip. Glad that you are in that position, JJ. We got to meet at the SoCal Open, which you put on. I think you saw that I entered and you chose not to compete that day. I think that was very clear that you didn't want to catch these hands. And
I saw what you did to Ed. I saw it. I was like, well, you know.
No, you guys put on a really awesome tournament. For me, it was my first tournament. It was a really good intro to the sumo community for me, and yeah, I really appreciated it. I had family members come talk about how great it was and how good of an experience it was. So you guys, Hana Sumo in general, really good leadership on your part, and you guys are doing good stuff. So really appreciate it. And that's why we wanted to invite you on today for sure. We liked how you represented the sport. But getting into that a little bit, how did you end up like connecting with sumo? Like, where'd that come from for you?
So for me, sumo, it was like always in the back burner. I grew up, um, I was born in the 80s, so that officially makes me old, I know. But I grew up and I was watching Kanishiki. I was right there at the end of the Kanishiki run. They were on ESPN2, I want to say. Um, and I kept catching the end of sumo. I was like, oh, that's cool. And I kept seeing it and thinking, I think I could do that. And then one year, it was in '07, I saw a flyer for the US Sumo Open. I reached out to the director and I didn't really get any response back. For me, I wanted to make sure that if I'm doing sumo, it's not in the blow up suit, right? I think that the blow up suit is kind of like blackface. It's just my immediate interpretation. I'm like, this doesn't represent the nation, this doesn't represent the culture. And I always thought of wrestling as a very primal way of expressing your emotions, and it kind of precurses English, right? It precurses all language. And from there I was like, how do I figure this out? A few years pass and podcasts start becoming popular. It must have been in 2010, 2012. There's a podcast called 230 Dudes, and they picked miscellaneous subjects to talk about, and one of them was sumo. And as they were talking about sumo, they talked about grand sumo. And then they talked about this thing that I never heard of, amateur sumo. And they talked about weight divisions and how there were all these different ways of doing things. So I start looking around. I see Bayamba doing sumo, and I reach out and I was able to go and train a couple days in LA with Sumo Yama, Takeshi, and Bayamba, which was um, eye opening. My very first match that I ever did was with Danny Avila, and he crippled me. And when I say that, you're like, oh, like, no, he gave you a good roll. Like, no, 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 no. Like, I ran into him, and I think one match I beat him, and then the next two I did not. And he hit me so hard that my back stopped working a little bit, because I'm a judoka by nature, right? I'm a judoka, so I'm like, oh, I'm going to like accept his tachi and then just use it as kazushi to off balance and try to throw. doesn't work that way in sumo. Tachi hurts. And yeah, that's how I started sumo.
So before that, you were doing judo,
Mhm.
and what was that like for you well, how long had you done judo previously?
I started judo when I was 5 years old, so that means I've been doing I've been doing judo longer than anything else in my entire life.
Did you do other grappling arts other than judo before sumo?
I'm also a black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, brought to me by judo. I
Sure,
was,
gotcha.
judo was my base, and then from there I started doing other things, including a little bit of wrestling. And as of recently, in the last 2 years or so, I've been doing bulk.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, we're big fans of both here. Just from your perspective, especially as a judoka, that transition to sumo, um, I'm coming from a wrestling background, American wrestling, freestyle, Greco, all that stuff. And there's aspects that I definitely bring in. I think that there's very clear similarities. I try to tell every wrestler I can that sumo is kind of a cool option for you when you're done with your wrestling career, because everyone goes to BJJ, right?
Yeah,
That's kind of what is kind of expected with a lot of wrestlers afterwards. It's hard to do wrestling like as an adult, as a hobby. It's just too hard. It's so grueling. So I'm trying to push more people towards sumo, especially those of us that really like the takedown game and don't care so much about rolling around. So for you, like what was that transition like? Obviously, you probably know how to grab a mawashi a little bit better than I would have. I would assume. But yeah, what's that transition like?
so I think that the mawashi is honestly, for better or worse, it's a crutch, right? I think that since there's only one thing, like quote unquote, object that you can grab in sumo is the mawashi, it ends up making your sumo kind of weird, right? If you watch pro sumo, high school sumo, college sumo, the businessman sumo, all the different levels of sumo, the mawashi is barely used as because when you look at the winning techniques, it's usually oshidashi or frontal force out, frontal push out, right? It's either one of those, and at you see that, and then you go, oh, holding the hands here isn't really helping, right? Now of course there's a lot of different, I'm a grappler's grappler, right? Like in sumo I'm going to be grappling, and I love hip toss. But for you to be like in judo mindset, you're thinking big throw, right? You're going for the ippon, so you grab the mawashi, and the big part of it is to finish the throw. In sumo, with the ability of pushing someone out or forcing someone out, you kind of have to use the mawashi and then throws with the kimarates into kind of a like as a kazushi, right? So you use it as an off balance, then to force the person out, and then that can bump up your winning, right? And sumo's, a lot about winning. So I think that I came in with a lot of throws, and it's sumo has made me a better judoka because now I'm not as dependent upon grips. Now I've kind of adapted more into like a little bit more of a nogi judo mindset, or a nogi like wrestler, right? Where I'm utilizing more overhooks, underhooks. Also, judo has the rule change of 2008, which really affected me for going into the Olympics.
Yeah.
Um, the like exclusion of grabbing legs really kind of hurt the martial art of judo. And you don't have to really worry about that in sumo, where I I like to. I'm a big grappler, right? I try to look at all grappling and look at the similarities of grappling, and try not to look at the differences of grappling, right? So when I went into jujitsu, it was I went in with my judo mindset, and I was like, okay, so jujitsu is kind of like the MMA of grappling. And I was like, all right, cool. And then you start adding in groundwork, and then it gets a little bit too focused into ground. I love it. Don't get me wrong. It's what pays my bills. I absolutely love jujitsu. Don't get me wrong. But it's really focused a little bit too much in the ground, where it's mutated into a double guard pull kind of weirdness of it, where I think it's less important as a martial art, right? But then in sumo, the importance is basically either you're controlling the space, you're forcing somebody out, or making them fall, right? And so I was like, oh, this is the other side of that mixed martial arts of grappling, where the emphasis is standing, which made me so happy.
I think I relate to a lot of what you're saying. I think something I've learned over the last year is the mawashi can be a distraction,
Mm,
especially if you're coming from a different grappling art where you don't have that as much. Where it's like I first started sumo, I'm like I got to be grabbing the mawashi. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what it's there for. And I started going like I'm really just putting my hands down and opening myself up to in a lot of ways that I'm not used to. So I'll that's an adjustment I'm making, and the way I describe it to a lot of people, especially wrestlers, is I like sumo because it's like you don't have to finish your takedowns. It's like the hardest part about wrestling sometimes is just it's not just getting on that leg, it's finishing the takedown and they're resisting the whole time, right? And it's like, well, now I just got to get their hand to touch. It's fine. This is
yeah,
easy now. This is a lot better and my knee's not getting tweaked nearly as much.
that part. My knees are so much. It's so much healthier to do sumo.
Yes, yes. Much less time being tired with someone else twisting me around is probably good for me at my age. I'm an '80s guy too, so yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, cool, cool. Well, let's get into the history a little bit here. I would say the one of the big things that when I first came in contact with sumo that wasn't just pop culture and like seeing people in the fat suits on uh, you know uh, uh, Austin Powers or something, right? Was I actually went to Japan in 2005. I got to go for about a month, and I'm doing the tourist thing, visiting castles and things like that. And one of the castles in Kyoto that we went to, they had this really big board, and it had all these different results from sumo tournaments going back like 300 years. And I'm
yeah,
like, whoa, just seeing a sport that old was really cool. And 300 years is nothing in sumo, right?
yeah.
I think generally I mean, the thing with grappling arts is like you were saying, it is so primal that it's really hard to say like this is when sumo started and this is when whatever started, right? But in general it's kind of thought that sumo as we generally know it um, probably started around 1500 years ago during the Heian period, and pre 18 or 1185 or so it was very much connected to like the harvest, right, and agricultural ritualism and almost like a dance in a lot of ways where it wasn't even necessarily always a fight necessarily, right? Really connected to just a lot of Shinto ritualism and respecting the harvest and hoping for the best, right? Is that kind of how you've uh, understood the origins?
Yeah, 100%. Where it's it starts off from the two original yokozunas, which were deities,
Mhm.
like, and so it's in that oral history, and it is literally just a harvest festival that ends up becoming a sport where like most wrestling comes from.
And those deities you mentioned, those are first mentioned in the uh, Kajiki manuscript from 712 AD. And yeah, between the two gods, who, and I'm going to try to pronounce their names, uh, Tekamikanaka and Taka Mikazuki are the two names of the gods. And I guess it was like a battle between themselves for the Japanese Isles and control of the Japanese Isles, right?
Correct.
So fascinating, having a lot of like mythology behind a sport, right, is really cool. Not always something that's usual in sports, especially ones that survive to this day.
Of course.
So goes history goes back super far. You have the Nihon Shoki, which is published in 720, and that makes the claim that the first sumo match was in 23 BC. So we have at least a claim that's recorded, like an actual match that is not between two gods, but between people. being in 23 BC. Obviously, if that's the first written testimony we have of it, it was probably happening much sooner than that, at least to some degree. And during the Heian period, it was a very different sport, right? Mostly unregulated, and to a certain extent fought to the death at times, right? Um, Sumo was often later on utilized more as like something that the an audience at the imperial court would watch, especially during the Kamakura period. And once it kind of left this like entertainment aspect of like the high courts and nobility, it became much more of like samurai training, right? And this is where from what I understand, people say this is where you get a lot of like uh, judo coming out of sumo, as well as Japanese jiu-jitsu, and these and techniques from that coming out of sumo itself, which I did not had not heard about previously.
Yeah, if you John Jocks is one of my favorite people to talk to. He's one of the founding American Sumo Federation members. And he'll speak to it, and he always refers to sumo as the grandfather of Japanese martial arts. And if you think about it in that way, you're like, oh, that makes sense. And then when you see the Kimarites, you're like, this all makes sense because it that Japanese martial arts, you'll see it in sumo, and then it'll be in jujitsu, and you'll see it in judo, and then obviously judo is the most diluted of them.
Yeah, and it's something we see throughout everywhere, right? Like everyone figured out the underhook, no matter what part of the
Hmm.
world you were from. Like people figured out the underhook, people figured out getting wrist control, people figured out our stances are all extremely similar. Some might be more staggered, some might be a little bit more bent over, but the concepts and the logic behind how we're moving our bodies is essentially the same, right? It's not too divorced from ourselves, just because you can study European martial arts, you can study sword fighting, you're going to see those exact same concepts across martial arts in general, just because it works. If it works, it works, right?
And the human body, we're again more similar than we are dissimilar. And regardless, we have two arms, two legs for the most part, and we're trying to throw somebody onto the ground with two arms and two legs. There's only so many different ways of doing that. And that's why you'll see like ippon seonage or ippon seo in different martial arts around the world.
And then we have later on, as we're kind of like starting to see, especially the samurai period, kind of come to a close in some ways, right? You get into like the 1300s, where it's not over, right? But we start to see sumo transferring away from just pure training or show, and becomes a little bit more popular with like the masses and not just the nobility, right? It kind of exits the world of privilege in a little bit, right? And the commoner is into sumo. They're watching it, right? And they're interested and they're participating. And I thought that was really fascinating, because this is something that we also see. We saw in Cornish wrestling in one of our previous episodes, where it starts out as like it's this folk style, but there are periods where it kind of ebbs and flows in between like popular with just the common folk who are just getting together and having a wrestling match.
What
And
country is the origin of that?
say that again.
What country does that come from?
Cornish wrestling, England. Yeah,
Okay.
south of England, yeah. And it flows, back and forth, like, more into, like, the nobles are really into it, and they're, like, really controlling it and putting on tournaments and things like that, and it's really popular with one group and then popular with the lower class and upper class, and I just think that's really interesting that, how a sport can have that, right? I think you see that with food too, where it's like this
Mm.
is a low food and then it gets popular and trendy, and then rich people start using it like lobster or something like that, right? um and this idea of like, I'm getting off topic now, but like amateurism being an aspect of sports, right? Where it's like who is participating in this and who is it made for?
Right.
And sumo's no different, right? As a product, it's made for through the years, it was made for a different audience depending on what was going on. And then we get a little bit into like the Edo period. And this was interesting because Edo period, there was a time during the early and mid Edo period where a lot of aspects of Japanese culture were not being shunned necessarily, although I guess you could say it was. But there's this idea of they're not in the Meiji Restoration yet. And there's kind of this idea of like moving away and moving towards um, a sort of less Japanese view of the world, right? And like
Mm.
this almost rejection of traditionalism. And sumo was actually temporarily banned um, due to like a lot of street fighting popping up. Like sumo was like considered a street fight in some ways. But this isn't too far off to when they were like starting to say, okay, we're going to ban samurai swords, or we're going to ban certain haircuts and things like that, right? So it's kind of in that same time, but it does return eventually um, under like an official organization in 1684. And this is kind of a big time where sumo, it doesn't go away after this. It remains popular at this time, but it's like towards the end of the Edo period, and sumo is now under an official organization, and they're putting on tournaments. Um, and like I said, it was losing popularity due to Western influence, especially when moving towards that Meiji Restoration period, right? And under Emperor Meiji, as part of like his like nationalistic sentiments, that's when sumo like really gets restored and brought back to popularity because they're trying to repopularize a lot of Japanese traditional cultural stuff. And then like around 1868, they started putting on tournaments. They had a lot of changing of the rules. Like the doyo is invented, right?
Yes.
And which, like a lot of the, and we're gonna talk about some of the terminology, not all the terminology, because there's too much, obviously, for this one little podcast. But yeah, for the last couple hundred years, sumo has been largely unchanged. There's probably a few little rule tweaks they've made here or there, but the idea of like, hey, we have a basho series, everyone fights, whoever's got the best record wins. And that's kind of where the evolution of the modern sport started.
Including the development of starting with your knuckles on the ground. Starting with your knuckles down in the tachi position. That was a later rule. You can
Yes,
still see
yes.
footage of them, the Gyoji's there, the Gyoji says, Hajime, and then, or Hakyoi, excuse me, I was doing judo earlier.
Yep,
And then they just
yep.
run into each other. And you're like, oh, this is completely different. Uh, so just that small rule change made a, quite the big difference. Right now, like it's hard to imagine sumo without that like initial tachi.
Well, and you can see like how that would like the way the tachi is even viewed now, right? Where it's like it's the honorable thing to do a hard tachi, right? But obviously it's not against the rules to be a little bit soft on your tachi or sidestep, right? And but if you're starting both standing up and like you're already developing this expectation of culture of just like we're coming forward hard, you know, um, you kind of understand like okay, I see where that's coming from. That's like honor culture stuff, right? That's how it's being developed. And as soon as you start going, okay, I got to hit harder, okay, so they're going to start putting their knuckles down. That's coming up now. We're hitting harder. And as soon as you start hitting it harder, then it's like, okay, are we going to be a little bit okay if someone doesn't want to like really go hard here? So yeah, I'm curious about like that's something I've been curious about, where it's like the intensity of the tachi is obviously like really culturally ingrained within the sport. um and like they have the whole like frowning upon someone who wants to step away even though it's not against the rules.
Right.
But yeah, weird evolution of that aspect of the sport, of the tachi itself. And the tachi, for listeners wondering, is that initial hit in sumo that is so iconic.
Yeah, and it's amazing if someone is like you would think that a win is a win, but if say a yokozuna, which is the highest rank in sumo, starts doing henkas where they step to the side and snap down, right? If they start doing that, they're seen as less than, and
Hmm.
that's not a behavior of a yokozuna, right? So it's interesting how even say like for instance Hakuho, who was basically like the Michael Jordan of modern day sumo. I feel like that's an easy like analogy. He was big on just getting that W, and some of his wins people just didn't like it. Like, and I'm talking about Japanese people, the
Yeah,
most important people of that particular cultural.
right. I mean, you watch highlights of Hakuo, and like I understand, that the Hank is not like it, not what they're expecting, but if you're gonna want to show somebody like here's what a good Henke looks like, Hakuho had some like it was sick. It was so cool the stuff he would do, like his quickness and just like the swim move, or he'd stick his hand out right away to block the vision and step away during that, like just totally cool. Like
Yeah,
just made it look so cool and slick, and it's like you know, yeah,
effortless.
from a Western view, at least for me, when I watch that stuff, I'm like, God, what a smart guy.
Well,
Just totally good control of his body and technique and timing. Just I have to respect it.
that's I feel like that's always the balancing act, especially for like we both run sumo clubs, and there's this because sumo isn't just a sport, it's also a like religion. So there is a part of it that you have to honor traditions of the past. Now, how do you honor that? It all depends on your interpretation of that, right? So I will show generally like very much forward sumo, and then I'll dig through the different kimarates because I am a grappler's grappler, and no matter what, my Tachiai is never going to be like Danny's, right? I'm never going to have a like Division 1 football Tachiai. It's just never going to happen. I can train for it, but it's never going to really be as good. So it's all about like that balance of honoring one part of it that is important to that to the culture of the people, and then it's the other one where I'm just trying to get that W.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about some of the common terms. A sumo wrestler, as we will often call them here in the West, will usually be referred to as rikishi or sumotori. Um, in Japan, so people hear those words. That just all that means is a guy that does sumo, or a fighter in general, right? Chirichozu. I was hoping you would describe what chirichozu is.
So Chirichozu is the starting religious part. I like to just say the ritual of sumo. So you're going to go into a second term called Sankyo, which is basically like a deep squat with your feet fairly narrow, and your knees pointed outward. And then from there, it's dipping your hands into sand, washing and purifying your hands, opening up. There's a clap, and everything that you see in the Chirichozu is purposeful. So that clap is to scare the demons away. Again, this is a religious art. So that is a big part of it. The clap needs to be loud and deliberate, which is supposed to get rid of the bad spirits. And then from there, you bring your hands out, up, and you present that you have no weapons.
Beautifully said. This all takes place on the doyo, which is the circle, invented in 1578. It's about 15 feet in diameter. Yeah, that is a raised stage, essentially made out of clay. It's a really beautiful process to see it being made. If folks ever look up a video of a doyo being constructed, lots of people working together, and yeah, it's a really cool piece of craftsmanship. You'll see in some tournaments it may even crack at times, totally understandably. It has to be repaired sometimes. Those of us participating in amateur sumo, generally, we're not able to participate on a raised clay doyo, and we have just flat canvas that we put down. But that is what the circle is generally called. We already talked about the mawashi, which is the belt. And there's generally three people with it on the doyo at a time. You have your competitors, and you also have your yoji, who is essentially the referee. And something quite interesting and cultural about them is they are carrying a knife. Would you like to talk about why they would have a knife on the doyo?
Yeah, so the the knife is in case they call the wrong decision, they are supposed to end their own life with that, or at least start to do it, which is wild. Absolutely wild. But again, this is yeah, like at least 2,000-year-old art and religion. So there is a lot of archaic parts of it, which I absolutely love. It's also a beautiful knife. If you ever get to see one, it's a pretty dope knife. There's one part of the doyo, the anatomy of the doyo
Yeah,
that you neglected. It's the tawada. So the
thank you.
tawada is the raised rice bell, or in America and around the world in amateur sumo, it's made out of this very dense foam, and it should be very dense foam, not squishy. It's supposed to be unmovable, dense for a reason. It is the border of the match. And as a person that's competed on the world stage, I have competed in clay. So they're e- on the outside of the Tawada, they will put salt on the outside, and fresh sand and salt. So you will see if, for some reason, there's a fight right at the edge, they'll be able to look at the print to see whose foot hit first.
And then we also something another term to bring up is heya, which are the stables, which are famous in sumo, where competitors are training. They're living there, they're training. There's often a hierarchy. There can often be problematic aspects of hazing historically. And yeah, really interesting aspect of the culture within sumo where it's like it's not necessarily like other sports where people are just on a team, right? It's a like hyper team. It's almost like family oriented,
Mm,
where you have expectations of duty to take care of each other in certain ways, and there's a lot of like the service is very upward, right? Traditionally, the stronger rikishi are going to have some privilege around there, and younger guys are probably going to get less food or only have a chance to get food after their more senior Heya mates have eaten, right? There's a lot of this, and I don't know. Do you feel like that's a culture that is starting to shift within sumo from your perspective?
no, I think that that's living very strong, and I think that there's less abuse happening now, or at the very least, less reported abuse.
Mhm.
Um, because there has been issues, like we spoke about Hakuho before. He was removed as Oyakata, so the head of his heya, due to people being abused by others and him not following up. And I also think that it's hard to imagine a heya. It's it is a family dynamic, right? But it's also unlike any other sport
Yeah.
where each person is literally trying to do the same thing, right? So even the younger people that come in, and most of the time they're just responsible for cooking, cleaning, and they might practice a little bit. And if you're a foreigner coming in, you're doing like a year of just being like Japanese indoctrination, just like pushed upon you. And from there, you're expected to rise up. And then there's a point where your athletic endeavors just will not, some people are just meant to be champs and some aren't. But when you look at that and you're like, oh, it's kind of like the harassment that you'll see in football, it doesn't quite fit because everybody has they're in the same team, and
Mhm.
it's a winning team, and everybody has different roles. But it would be like a house full of quarterbacks, and they're not making millions. Instead, they're making maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 40,000 and below, and they're forced to live in the same house. So it's like a weird big brother meets keeping up and then sucking up.
It's like the Ultimate Fighter houses.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah, that's a lot closer, right? That's a lot closer. Yeah, that's good. That's actually good.
um, and professional sumo today, it's run by the Japanese Sumo Association, the JSA. And there are pro divisions, right? It's not just a single division. There are, top divisions, and depending on where you are in the divisions, and even within the divisions, there's a further breakdown, right? With the yokozuna at the very top, who is like essentially a grand master, a grand champion. There does not need to be a yokozuna at all times. Sometimes no one's good enough to be given that title, but we have the yokozuna at the top. And then apart from the Yokozuna, you'll have the Ozeki, you'll have the Sanyaku, you'll have the Mayagashi. No, hold on. I'm going to get it. Mayagashira. Did I get that right?
Hey, bro,
Ma-
my Japanese is terrible. You got it.
and then there's the Juro. And these are like the top. These are all like the subdivisions of the top divisions, the people that are actually getting decent money, anywhere from $25,000 like per month to $10,000 per month. So these are kind of like the big dogs, right? These are all the people at the top, um, which is pretty cool. But at the same time, if you're not competing, your ranking can fall drastically and very quickly, meaning that what you're actually being paid can swing quite a bit and be very unreliable, your payment, right?
And
uh,
there is no, I mean, there's very small exceptions where
yeah.
they'll allow someone to not fall, but for the most part, doesn't matter if you're injured, doesn't matter, no matter what, you will fall down that rank. The only person that is exempt to that is the Yokozuna.
Yeah. And this has caused like some issues historically too, where there's a lot of practice within sumo of like, you have to compete even if you're hurt. Like there's no like getting healthy, and that could have probably led to a lot of really good fighters like maybe having not as long of a career as they could have had, right? Just because they're having to kind of keep up with the Joneses, for lack of a better term, coming to my head. But yeah, if you're constantly competing while injured, because you're trying to keep your ranking, it's only a matter of time before that kind of burns out.
Well, and keeping your ranking is multiple fold. So, one, that the more money that you make, obviously it's better for you as an individual, but also is better for your Heya
Mhm.
because your Heya is only able to feed people off of the money that they get from the JSA.
Yeah, real complicated, but a very different system than what we generally think of with professional sports, right? It's not franchises, right? It's not this thing where you got, I mean, you do have a bunch of billionaires funding things, obviously, and there's some other stuff going on there with the JSA, but it's very different. It's not this like very collaborative thing where we're going to go against each other like you would see like in American football, right? Where there's just lots of money coming into it, in a way that is able to be distributed in this like meritocracy way kind of thing. It's a little trickier in sumo. It's at least it seems to be.
And the sumo wrestlers are all technically employees of the government,
Right,
which
right.
is also a thing that you have to keep in mind, especially during COVID times, where people could not government employees could not just go to say 7-Eleven. They had to stay within strict stay inside, um, which some people got kicked out of their hayas in the middle of COVID because they just needed to go outside. So
Yeah.
you have to keep that in mind too, that they are a representation of the government for better or worse.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good example of why when like foreigners go into pro sumo, like if they are not towing lines and they're not representing Japanese sumo in a Japanese way, doesn't matter what you're ranked, you're out of there. That could be it, right? Um, So interesting. Another term that you brought up earlier was kimarite. And sumo is known for having the 82 kimarite, right? Kimarite meaning winning move or winning technique, right? The way in which you win a sumo bout. And something for me when I coming from a different background where it's like if someone told me there's 82 techniques in folk style wrestling, I would be like, Yeah, if you're a new person,
Hmm.
like I'm so used to being like, no, there's like thousands of different variations and things like that, right? But there's a lot more elements to it, right? Um, and especially when if you can look at the list of yokozuna and you can kind of, as we alluded to earlier, you see, especially in the 2000s, the Mongolians coming into sumo and really starting to dominate. And to me, from the way I've interpreted this and watched video, it seems like they're kind of doing some new stuff that just wasn't happening, like technique wise, a little bit more leg attack stuff. That, not that it wasn't a known technique previously in Japan, but it wasn't being utilized as much. So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on like, do you think like when you hear there's 82 techniques, do you go, okay, that's a very oversimplified situation? Or is it like, no, that's kind of it. That's kind of like what actually works in the sport.
So it's it's judo and sumo. This is where they meet like exactly head to head, right? Where like you have the 67 throws of judo and you got your 82 kimarates. You're like, oh, that's all it is. But of course, there's variations of it, right? That's just how they try to classify. And for those 82, it's a classification. And if you look into sumo as a whole, it's probably the best recorded sport ever because they go back.
Yeah,
You can go back 800 years and see what was the most popular winning technique at that time, right? So you can go back and then now you can see like people like Ura pulling out a throw that's only been done 0.02% of all sumo history. And they're
that's
like,
my boy.
okay. And that's, like it's absolutely insane. So I think it's more of just trying to categorize, right? Of course, from there, it goes into interpretation. Like, was that this throw or this throw? As a judoka, and this is always going to be one of those things. Japanese think that Haraigoshi, Uchimata, Hanigoshi, Oguruma are basically all Uchimata, right? Like the competition aspect of it, it's Uchimata, 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 Uchimata. I'm like, but your legs in a different spot, right? So that's one of those like it's mostly used for to categorize.
Gotcha. Now we've talked about like the traditionalism within sumo, and like also like you mentioned like the importance of maintaining and preserving a lot of that, right? Like there's a lot of it that I like when I'm just running a practice. um there's part of me, like especially because of the background that I'm coming from with wrestling, where it's like we change all the time, right?
Hmm.
There's ebbs and flows to the sport and expectations about what works, what doesn't, what new techniques are worth teaching, what isn't, how we should be training, how we should be structuring practices, things like that. Change happens all the time. um should we be stretching, should we be doing a dynamic warm, should we do it, yeah, that stuff like changes constantly. And with it being a more modern sport like wrestling specifically, that change is much more welcome and easier to do. When I'm teaching sumo, like there's things that I do during sumo practice strictly because I know that we should do this just for the like whether it's a good idea or not, we should do this because of the tradition, we should do this to respect the tradition that it's coming from, right? Now, having said that, are there things within sumo, professional or international, otherwise, um, that you would like to see change?
Oh yeah. I think professional is its own thing, and I almost don't want to change anything except for I think that they should have if someone gets hurt or something along those lines, they should be able to like take it like a red shirt, right? I think
Hmm.
that that's the big thing there, right? I think that different heias are doing different things as far as for like their particular training. Some are adding in like Takeda Fuji is adding in powerlifting into sumo, and that seems to work really well for him. But then you have the other side where Kanishiki is like, that's all garbage. You just need to do Shikos, right? And I think that both are valid. And I like to have kind of an open mind, especially as a person that has science backing them up. But there's something to the traditional movements, right? Movements, I think, are they get a bad rap, right? Sometimes it's just looks like you're doing touch bud in the park. That's just the nature of the beast sometimes. But being able to move lateral, uh, different patterns and almost make a like a codification. That's a word I just made up. Codification of your sumo practice is good. I think that that's actually good. But there's a couple like absolute staples of sumo, like Shiko. Shiko is underrated, underrated. Suriashi, underrated, and needs to always be done. Um, but I got a little sidetracked. If there was a rule that I was going to change, it's the strikes to the face.
So I was going to ask about this. One of my frustrations, especially after competing in the U.S. Open, um, was there was a lot of uh, controversy around like, oh, was that a wind up on that strike to the face? Was it straight ahead? And there's a big part of me that's like, please just choose to have the strikes to the face or don't.
Yeah,
I hate gray area in sports when I don't feel like it needs to be there.
that's
You
the
know?
big problem with sumo.
Yeah,
It's a lot of gray. It's a
yeah.
lot of gray. And the strikes to the face, it's if you establish it as a rule and you say that this is what you can't do,
Hmm.
you have to call it at that point. Now, sumo, unfortunately, even on the amateur level, doesn't have a penalty system,
Yeah.
which some people would say that's great, shouldn't have it. It's not traditional. I get that, but as I think the burden on amateurs, especially like the term amateur is a little weird, and
Sure.
on the world stage, the term amateur gets a little weirder. Where like Ukraine will compete against America, like we could have an American go out there, win a medal, he comes back home, he gets absolutely nothing from the United States. Nobody cares. It's all good. Like that's your own trophy. Trent, one of the most decorated American sumo wrestlers, has won third place multiple times on the world stage. Came back. Nobody knows who he is. Right. That's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
In different country, let's say Ukraine, for instance, you go out there, you win a medal, a world medal, you get money.
Hmm.
You get money. That money will stack up and it will better your life. It will also set you up once you retire for a government job. So, Poland, similar situation. Now, it's a little politicky to make sure that you have something on the back end, but there's this kind of a system established, right? Now, with that being the case, it's like, man, Georgia, for instance, I'm just going to say it. Georgia is one of the worst countries at striking at the face,
Hmm.
right? That's what they do. They know it's against the rules, but the rules are gray. They win money. They can win like actual money. They're like, I'm going to do it, and if you're going to call me on it, we'll call me on it. That's
We'll
fine.
just restart
Whatever
the
happens.
match. Yeah.
So with that, like their strike to the face, it goes out, and if it connects and you win, I mean, what's wrong? I mean, I can't blame you.
Yeah.
Can't blame you.
Yeah. I'm very much with you there where it's just like I was reviewing one of my matches and I'm like, I think my strike was probably illegal, but like no one said anything. No one was going to say
Have,
anything.
have you read the rules?
Well, that's hard to do. I don't know if you've noticed, but they're hard to find. They're not on the USA Sumo website.
And the one on the International Sumo website is
Uh-huh.
very confusing because
Yeah.
it's translated very vague. But that's kind of the idea of it,
Mhm.
right? And I kind of get it because if you ask them, it's you set the rule and they don't break the rule. I'm sorry, the non-Japanese people are just not going to do that, and they break different rules, but that's
Right,
a different
right.
thing. Um, but this rules are going to be always one where I start rambling. A one that I saw in Japan, and it was done against an American middleweight, and it was Finland. It was hits close fist to the back of the head. All right, and when I say back of the head, I mean like on the neck. It
Yeah.
was not pummeling. It's not pummeling. It's not
Right.
overhand pummeling.
Not just
It
a good
wasn't a.
club.
It wasn't a club.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a. It was literally closed fist to the back of the head,
Yeah. Hammer
and
fist.
this is where sumo kind of falls apart. And I've seen it in a few different rules. Um, they'll have an issue. They'll stop the match, and then when they stop the match, they'll go, "Hey, don't do that, bop, bop, bop." And then it will continue. And I'm like, you can't do that with someone hitting in the back of the neck. That's in all martial arts, everything, every discipline, every MMA. You can't do that. You can't do it. The only one that kind of gets away with it is a kick to the back of the head because it kind of happens. It kind of,
Sure.
but outside of that, um, sorry, that was a long rambling JJ
No, no.
about rules.
Just those though. Like I was expecting you to have even more stuff coming out.
I have more. I have more. But you know what? We're talking. A, another weird one is the concept of bad sportsmanship.
Hmm.
So in 2022 in the World Games, Egypt beat Ukraine and won the lightweight championship. He did a backflip. He did a backflip. They stop the match, and this is where if he does a backflip, you're like, it's bad sportsmanship. You just call it there. It's done, right? That should be done. But what kind of happened is he did a backflip, and his coach got mad, who was a retired professional sumo wrestler named Sandstorm, tried to get onto the dojo, ended up getting escorted out. Um, the guy stayed out on the dojo. They ended up throwing the match again or doing the match again. He ends up winning, but it's one of those like it's inconsistent. It's one of those. It's like more of a feeling. You try to like penalize the guy, but then you didn't. And then a little later, a different athlete from a different country did a backflip and then like made it a very like political thing and was like, it's okay, don't worry about it. And I feel like that weird inconsistency. You have to have rules, and those rules have to be set and they need to be followed. Um, There's a lot of rules. The Tachiai Hikimasio rule is one that I find a little interesting. So you're newer into sumo. What's your interpretation of the start of a sumo match?
like
So
like
after you do your
after Chirichozu.
Kirichozu, you come into the line, you do your Sankyo. Um, Talk about that position from there.
So for me, it's like if I'm going to put my fist down, I need to be ready to go. Is
Okay.
kind of where I'm at. Um, I and like with the rules in amateur international sumo, I know we both have to have our fists down. I know that there was like some bullshit around that where for a while people were taking forever to put a fist down. I will say I'll get to my complaint in a second,
Yeah.
but to answer your question, we put our fist down. Let's go. I
Yeah.
wanna go. I wanna fight. I
Hmm.
don't wanna do this bullshit where it's like, so and so is gonna stand there for a minute and slowly come down and slowly maybe you know what? I changed my mind. I'm gonna stand back up. That stuff drives me insane.
Okay.
I think we should both get over there. We should put our fists down. We should go. And I don't want anything else. I don't even like. I wouldn't even mind if we treated it more like pro sumo, where you don't even have to put your fist down. You just have to be ready to go,
Yeah.
right? And you have to hit. But I don't like the games people play when we get
Yeah.
ready before our tachiai. Stop playing games with me. Let's like I almost told a guy to put his fist down when I was facing against him at one point. I was like, I almost said, put your fist down. But that's how I feel.
Mm. So with the previous rules, that there was a lot of like fuckery. There's just what
Yeah,
it was.
yeah,
One knuckle down, and then what someone would do, they have one knuckle down and the other one just be and try to jump. And that's not that's not a fair beginning,
yeah.
right? Now, the idea of having a fair, even tachiai where the tachiai is started from you hearing the gyoji say hakyoi. Now, of
Mhm.
course, different gyojis will have different interpretations of when you're supposed to go, which I also think is an issue. Some gyojis like to finish their full word,
The full word, not just the sound, not just
not
off
just the
the yeah.
sound. Some most will allow you to go at the ha.
Mhm.
Now, there is a that the rule is that the Gyoji says Hakyoi and you go, right? That's like at least within the rules that you can read, that's what it says. And you're like, all right, cool. Well, we can work within that. Um, some countries that will never get called on jumping the gun will they will
When you say some countries, you generally mean Japan, right?
I only mean Japan. I only mean Japan. I was trying to be very political. You're like, no, throw it
Bring
out
it
there.
on.
It's all good. It's all good. So they will jump it. So they'll go on the breath in. So and they'll go. And they can't get called on it. They can't get called on it. And I have had discussions with people that are international Gyojis. They go, I was like, hey, why didn't you call that a false start? And they go, oh, it's because there is a hierarchy on the doyo. So there is a Kyoji from Japan. The head judge is from Japan, and they're like, "Well, no." I'm like, "That's not. We can't. We can't have that, right? Like, we
Yeah.
want to have a nice, even, fun sport. Can you imagine if I don't know? Let's let's say swimming. Swimming. They're like, oh, the American can start right before the gun. As soon as I put my hand up, the guy can go. Like you can't do that. You can't do that, especially in a sport where the initial tachiai, for the most part, wins the match. I like to
Yeah.
think not that, but it is. It is.
Yeah, I mean, for me, as long as it's called consistently, I don't care when you like. I'll like I teach people like when I was coaching wrestling, I coached for like 10 years, and it's like when you're getting set, right? You're listening for the whistle. Part of the coaching in wrestling is you don't just listen for the whistle; you watch the referee,
Yep.
right? You watch his hands, you watch his face, and like you're trying to jump that whistle,
Yeah.
right? You're trying to literally be moving as he is starting to breathe, right?
You're
That's what you
trying to
want.
hack your reaction time.
Yeah.
Now, if a different country does it, you can't penalize them.
Hmm.
It's that's not fair. Right? And of course, in sumo, the penalizing is not as extreme because all
Yeah.
it is no restart,
Yeah.
no restart, and I think you can do that. I've never seen a match just get washed.
Yeah.
I've never seen it. I don't think that there's actually a framework, even on amateur level. Like, never seen it. There's
It's one of those
always a
things where it's
winner.
like if that's the case, like if I have those referees and I'm going against a wrestler who I know is going to do that, I'm thinking I'm going to do it too, even if they call me for it.
Yeah.
I'm going to set the tone on that Tachi eye. I'm going to try to make it when we do restart, they're a little bit hesitant.
So if you want to see what that looks like, you go back into last year's. I want to say it was open weight. It was either open weight or it was heavyweight. Japan versus Mongolia. That
Okay.
was a battle. That was
Okay.
a battle of just false start, reset, chill, mate, false start. I was like, whew. It was a war of attrition in a weird way that I don't think most people appreciate it. Me as a like a just like seeing people beat systems. I'm like, oh, look at that.
Now, glaring omission here. We haven't talked about women's sumo,
Mm,
which for me, if I'm talking about stuff that I would like to see change in sumo, I think that's a big one. I know it's a tall ask, especially in Japan, to see pro women's sumo. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately. But when I watch international sumo, I'm very encouraged by women's participation and getting to see more of that. And I really want to see that grow. So if there's something I would love to see change, if I'm living in a perfect world, I would love to see more women getting involved in sumo and participating, because it is such a great sport for everybody. And I'm a big believer that's like if sport's good for one gender, it's good for every
and
gender.
they dominate.
Yeah.
They dominate the amateur scene in America. We in the last since Trent Sable, we haven't won a medal on the world stage outside of the women. Our women are just amazing, and they're
Hmm.
doing amazing sumo. Kanishiki loves seeing like Kellyanne sumo. Everybody is there. It's a smaller number of participants, but the matches are just fire. And anybody that goes against any woman will in like our top women in America, they're like, "Oh, I'm just getting my butt kicked." And they're like, "Yeah, that's what it is." Like there there should be there used to be a pro circuit of women sumo wrestlers in
Hmm.
Japan. Um but it always got into I think it got into a little burlesque at a point, but
Yeah.
there's always been a like a thread of a system, and then it just kind of disappears. And I think some of that has to do with cultural norms, right? Again, as an American dude, I don't want to really push upon Japanese culture, but I do think that we should have a at least a women's circuit, and or a maybe it's like a team situation, right? I think
Mm.
maybe that could be a fun mix of it, like 3-on-3 basketball, but
Oh
in
yeah.
sumo.
Okay, I'm gonna get your opinion on 3-on-3 basketball then.
I think it's a lot of fun.
I actually like it myself.
It's really fun. Half court makes sense. It's it's
We don't
action
need 10
packed.
people on a court. Come on.
Yeah.
Good deal, good deal. Um, yeah, anything else along the lines where it's like, hey, you're an advocate for sumo in the US. What's a message you put out to people?
My biggest message, and this is to every local club, everywhere. We need to invest in children.
Hmm.
There's I almost feel like I am the guy on the mountain wearing a mawashi saying, "Children do sumo. Come and try it. It transfers over. It gives you balance." And I'm like doing the talk that people do for judo, the talk that they do for jiu-jitsu about self-confidence and body awareness and body acceptance, and just like I feel like I'm in that echo chamber almost alone. As a country, I definitely feel that we can do better. We have amazing, strong kids, and we have a bunch of different things that kind of blend together, right? Like Mark Jones is in Florida. He also works with a lot of kids, but his entry in is football. So he
Hmm.
does football, and then he'll play like sumo drills with them. And then some of them will go over to sumo. And I'm like, all right, that's cool. That's a cool little hack to it, right? We're always working the PR of sumo with because of the Mawashi. And the Mawashi is such a small part of sumo, but it's the biggest hurdle.
Yeah, yeah, I feel you on that. And I agree. Like the only way it's really going to grow is getting the youth involved.
Yeah.
And I respect as someone running a club, I respect that it is much easier said than done. Especially if it's just like, look, like for me, this is something that, um, I just wanted to have a reason to exercise, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's just like I'm just a guy, in a club. I'll spend $50 a week to rent out an MMA gym space, or $50 a month or whatever it is, and just find reasons to do it. Um, but then making that next step of like, okay, how am I going to grow this past the adults that are just kind of filtering in? How do I get those kids involved, right?
I have worked extremely hard on trying to get kids into sumo. And one of the things that I've given up a lot of time,
Hmm.
especially when it got to nationals or any tournament that I run or anything along those lines, I will do a full circuit and I'll do cold calls to every judo gym, every MMA gym, every jiu-jitsu gym, every wrestling program, every high school wrestling, every like the high school wrestling programs also do like um like kind of like training camps during off season or
Hmm.
during spring break. So I will pop into that and I'll donate as much time as possible. And for as many as I go to, I might only get one, I might get three. Who knows? For nationals is a little easier. I'm like, hey, you want to be a national champion? How about you come out here and try? Like it's not, you uplift them and I've seen some kids change their lives, right? And I think even if I only get one, right, this time around for worlds, for nationals, I had 7 kids go participate. So they flew from San Diego to Austin, Texas, and then of that 7 kids, I have two or maybe three. I have three. Sorry, I have four. I have four going to worlds. I
Hell
forgot I
yeah.
have 2 clubs. I'm sorry.
All right, last question for you. When it comes to like a lot of the local tournaments that are popping up here and there around the United States, if you could tell someone to go to one of those tournaments, which one would it be?
I think the easiest one that everyone should go to is the SoCal Open in San Diego.
Oh my goodness.
It is by far my favorite tournament, even though if you see me there, you will be like, oh my God, he's stressed. His world is ending. He doesn't know what's up, what's down. That is how I have fun. I have fun with stress, and I'm always trying to mix in with the Japanese community, which I think that some of the best clubs that run sumo tournaments, there's a lot of other ones. I'm not going to say them because I'm only pushing myself right now, or I'm only promoting San Diego. But we will mesh in with the Japanese community, right? So you will blend in with your sister city community, which ours is Yokohama. They come out and they support us. We had the key to Yokohama at the SoCal Open, which was freaking rad because it's from Japan, looks epic. It looks super epic. It's looks like something out of freaking Final Fantasy. And then from there, you'll have cultural events like Bond Dance.
Is there an element that you would like to add to the SoCal Open?
Yeah. So the for me personally, I want to turn it into a Japanese festival, very much like when you go to Pro Sumo, and on the outside there's all these vendors and all of this, and then there's also sumo. I want it to be like a little bit behind the scenes. This year's coming up. We're trying to make it the SoCal Japanese Festival, and then from that, it will also have the SoCal Open in it. So it's a community event, and just one aspect of the community event is an awesome sumo tournament.
Excellent. Tight. Well, I can tell you it's already an awesome tournament. I said it already, but I really enjoyed myself. But one other question I always ask guests, doesn't have to be about sumo, obviously, but is there something about wrestling history or like anything within this realm of as you so well put it, just this very primal act that humans do? Is there a topic that you'd like to see covered?
I think that um, there's a lot of wrestling around the world, and again, I like to see that around the world, we all do some way of expressing ourselves, right? And the winning technique of snapping somebody down, putting them onto the floor, there's strangles, there's pickups, there's dumps, there's all of these different aspects. And it's, again, just like a level of communication. And I think if we truly focus on the similarities of people and stop focusing on the separations, right? Like the difference between Sui Jiao and bulk. Come on, let's just think they're the same thing and expand from there. Like, oh, Sui Jiao's so different. I can't do that in judo. You can. It's okay if you're not wearing shoes. It's okay, right? Um, that like there is, again, we are all people. We are all united, and we should not be divided.
Beautifully said, JJ. You got anything to plug for us?
Yes. So like I said, I have a lot of kids going to Thailand, and I have a GoFundMe that if you guys were able to, go there, share it, maybe donate, whatever, anything along those lines. Of course, if you cannot financially support, that is fine, but sharing it and just giving us more visibility on our GoFundMe, it would help. This is kind of a amazing year where I am trying to live up to what I'm preaching. So I'm not only bringing kids to Thailand to do sumo, but it's the first full girls team. So that's a lightweight, middle, heavyweight, and an open weight. So we have all of the divisions actually covered. And you have to remember that, especially, my kids, a lot of them are inner city, so we have to have a chaperone with them. So there's financial obligations, not just for the competitor, but also we're trying to help support the parent to get there too, so that they can see their child in safety, and they can see them win medals. And of course, I'm Honu Sumo everywhere. Honu Sumo on Instagram is by far the best way to get a hold of me. Honusumo at gmail.com. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about sumo, or if you, want to work with us on anything, I got you guys.
Hell yeah, man. Thank you for coming on.